get into some of the source references of the material. Because it's one thing to be dramatic and say things that have never been heard about before. That doesn't necessarily validate the information. And therefore tonight, to demonstrate the power of the Aleph Bet and refer to the sources wherein the Zohar bases this revolutionary understanding of the entire Bible, and I say the entire Bible, and we begin from the very beginning, when it says, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. That God created the heaven and the earth. And that's what it says in the Bible. Was that the first creation? From what we have discussed last night, we have come to the conclusion, based on Kabbalistic teachings, that the entire Bible is one of a cosmic code, nothing less, and unfortunately somewhat more, than a complete coded message. So in spite of the fact that we have suddenly come to a realization that the beginning of creation is not going to be heaven and earth. There was something else that was created long before heaven and earth. What could that have been? And so the Zohar, book number 1, page 23, says that 2,000 years before the creation of the universe, the Aleph Bet came into existence. Now, if we're going to try to explore the origins and possibly the history of the Aleph Bet, it is generally assumed that the Aleph Bet had its origination within the Bible. That's where this language called Hebrew supposedly originated. And along comes the Zohar and tells us that that is not so. The Torah, in the form that it was presented on Mount Sinai, and the world that preceded the revelation of the Torah on Mount Sinai, followed the creation of the Aleph Bet. Furthermore, the universe, all of its galaxies, and its endless galaxies, or I shouldn't say endless, because somehow the Zohar, or Rabbi Shimon, from wherever he received this kind of insight, understood that there are some 200,000 galaxies, as we mentioned yesterday. At the present time, I think we have knowledge of one. But maybe with some more sophisticated instruments, tomorrow we might even discover another couple. But I think we have a long way to go before we discover 200,000 galaxies. And how this information came to Rabbi Shimon, and how did the information concerning this entire universe and its formation and creation come to Abraham, if in fact these people entered the picture and stage of history of this universe at a much later date? How can Shabtai Danilo, a very famous Kabbalist, physician, and astronomer, provide us with the exact climatic conditions, for instance, of Venus? Do you know how many billions of dollars have been spent both by the Russian government and the American government, with all of its high tech today, cannot still for certain ascertain the climatic conditions on so close a planet as Venus? And yet, in his commentary on the Sefer Yetzirah, which we will touch upon briefly tonight because I'm leaving that for Monday evening when we will be discussing astrology and meditation. In his commentary on the Sefer Yetzirah, whom I mentioned last night, the authorship is attributed to Abraham the patriarch, describes for us how and when and what is its constitution of each and every single planet in the universe. Even if Shabtai Danilo had a particular spacecraft unknown to modern technology and somehow arrived at his destination, how could his information be as accurate when we are told that some of the light rays that we observe coming from outer space may have taken like some 2,000 or 4,000 or 10 million light years? Can't speak in terms of years. You've got to speak in terms of light years. That means, as we are told by astronomers, that there is a very good chance that by the time we observe those rays stemming from a particular star, that star in all probability ceased to exist. So there's a great problem out there in determining what really goes on out there. And yet along comes a rabbi like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and a Shabtai Danilo and describes in no uncertain terms. He doesn't even put in the if you've ever read physics material by famous authors. I'm speaking of famous physicists, famous astronomers. At the end of almost every chapter, if you haven't encountered, but it is not certain, then I'd like to read that book because I haven't found one yet where at the end of a chapter in the book, anything that has already been stated is concluded with a final sentence, but it is not conclusive. That was not the position taken by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai or Shabtai Danilo. Furthermore, in Hebrew, the vast universe with all of its galaxies is known as Olam. Olam. The literal interpretation, which of course, unfortunately, is usually corrupt, means world, universe. However, for those of you who not alone that you know Hebrew, because that's not sufficient, but for those of you who have made an attempt to arrive at the root and origin of each particular Hebrew word, you will then discover a world of information. The literal meaning of olam is helam, concealed. That is the literal meaning. And that for us provides an insight into what this world is all about. It conceals something. What we believe and what we think we see, we can thank our scientists today, is not reality. It is not the basic reality. And that conforms precisely with the idea of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The world is a total concealment. That means anything we observe, and if we're talking about something which is 2 million light years away, then I guess we can assume we are seeing what we see. It sounds kind of ridiculous. And how can we ever attempt or even think that we'll arrive at some basic knowledge of what's going on out there? How did these people know? How can Rabbi Shimon state very clearly that long before the creation of the universe, long before the creation of heaven and earth, and not only that, but when it says in the Bible that in the beginning God created heaven and earth, it doesn't mean that, because it was not the beginning of creation. And here we're making every attempt today to try to get back to that point of origin, the Big Bang. I understand they are like 2 seconds away from the Big Bang now. They're still not there, but like 2 seconds away, assuming it's all correct. But I still haven't seen some of our famous physicists say at the end, but the 4th minute away, that is absolutely certain. Oh, they're at stage number 2 minutes away, 2 seconds away. But nothing is certain at 10 seconds away, or for that matter, 2 million years away. But I guess this is the beauty of science, probing, exploring. That's the way you arrive at some destination. So the universe, from the Kabbalistic point of view, indicates that it is concealing something. What is it concealing? And so Rabbi Shimon goes on to compare this very simply to the human being. As a human being, it consists of 2 basic elements, internal and the external. The corporeal, the body, and the soul. Now, some of you here, and I don't think there is really, sometimes I do have an audience that is violently opposed to the word soul. I don't know if you are opposed to the word soul. I'll be more than happy to accommodate you. We can use the word candy if that is satisfactory. Okay? But I think we will all agree that there is something within us that motivates, initiates, and triggers this physical body of ours into motion. And at death, the body can still remain intact for a while, but we know. And Carillion photography, they claim that they can literally take a picture of the soul, or this thing, this internal entity, literally leaving the body at the time of death. But in any event, we all agree that there are two parts. Now, the fact that the body appears outwardly to represent the individual, the human being, nevertheless, we realize that without a body, for most of us, we could not detect the presence of metaphysical beings. I say most of us. Certainly that would not include Rabbi Isaac Luria, and needless to say, it certainly wouldn't include Rabbi Shimon, who made the statement at one time that why should it be this way? Why can't we see these metaphysical beings, nishamot, souls? And his response was, because if the average human being was permitted to observe all that which is around him, he would die of fright. And consequently, a veil was placed on most of humankind so as not to be in a position to observe the metaphysical. For most of us, the only way that we can become cognizant that there is an internal, intelligent being is by virtue of it being concealed within a corporeal matter. And consequently, continues Rabbi Shimon, every physical corporeal entity, like the table, which today we recognize is a cosmic living entity, externally, it appears inanimate. But the moment we probe and explore its internal, its atomic molecular structure, we are immediately aware of life existing right there in that table. But the only way we can detect life, the only way we can appreciate the fact that we can eat on this table is because there is an external concealment referred to as the wood of the table or whatever other material. Therefore, the universe, which followed an internal mechanism, an internal energy intelligence, was the Aleph Bet. It preceded all of creation, and furthermore goes on Abraham to remark that this entire universe, as we discussed last night, is one basic thought. All of the physical material, and we can thank our scientists who support that opinion, that there is no such thing as reality. Reality is only in the mind, and reality is thought. And therefore, the alphabet, each and every single individual letter represents an intelligent energy thought. The shape of each letter designates a particular and unique form of an energy intelligence. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, we are going to have to adopt a radical and certainly new approach to the way we have been thinking, whether we like it or not. For the layman, generally speaking, we have not been exposed to the problems that the scientists recognize today. For us, basically, We absorb the fruits of their labor in the way of televisions, computers, and other high-tech information. However, if we here have made, or we hope to make an attempt to explore the deeper meanings of things around us, then we're going to have to change our view, not only to conform with the Zoharic opinion, but with scientific data, which is already available. And that is the only thing that is real is that which is metaphysical. That which is metaphysical is thought. And there are an endless amount of degrees and levels of energy thinking, of energy intelligence. No different to the finite number of human beings in this universe, 4 billion, 5 billion, that each one represents a unique and particular energy intelligence. There are no two that are alike. That is the manifestation of the human being. But then we have to take into consideration trees, the animal kingdom, and even those mountains which, according to Rabbi Shimon and the Ari, grow each year. While you might be programmed from an elementary education that we all receive, that inanimate is just what the term denotes, inanimate. But there is no such thing according to the Kabbalistic teaching, and that each inanimate object contains a living entity. The differences between the animal kingdom, vegetable kingdom, the inanimate kingdom, and humankind is more fully described in the entrance to the tree of life and entrance to the Zohar. And so I don't want to delve upon the differences between them. But nevertheless, there is an infinite amount of varied energy intelligences that exist in our universe. Consequently, if we can accept that, and I don't think we should have any problems dealing with that kind of approach, then we'll have no difficulty in appreciating the fact when Abraham states in his Sefer Yetzirah that all the celestial bodies are energy intelligences, each one representing another sphere of energy intelligence. As two people sitting in this room, and each one symbolizing, portraying another form of energy intelligence, thinking differently than his neighbor, so too is the same concept in relation to all forms of celestial bodies. Now, I mentioned yesterday that we are in the age of Aquarius, and needless to say, for many years I had problems with the establishment in assuming that things are going to be different in the age of Aquarius, and we're going to have to radically change our way of thinking, because the age of Aquarius, when it comes upon us, and according to contemporary Kabbalists, including the first one who made this revelation, Rabbi Avraham Azulai, that the age of Aquarius began for all intents and purposes 250 years ago. And I want to quote Rabbi Shimon, who is, I guess, as good a rabbi as any of those we will ever meet in the course of our lifetime. And if he has permitted himself some 2,000 years ago to discuss the importance and the changes that are going to take place in the Age of Aquarius, then you could be very comfortable when you complete this seminar and come across your rabbi who's going to tell you, don't ever get involved in Kabbalah, don't ever study Kabbalah, it's dangerous, it's all those other things that he doesn't know anything about. And so I want to quote several quotes. First, we'll begin with his wonderful son, Rabbi Elazar, with whom he spent 13 years together, day and night. Can you imagine? Spending 13 years together with your father, day and night, in a cave. And he begins with the verse in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 2. Rabbi Elazar began with the verse, ask thee a letter of the Lord, ask it either in the depth or in the height above. That's the verse. And Rabbi Elazar continued, we have compared the former with the latter generations. We found that the former were conversant with a high cosmic wisdom by which they knew how to combine the letters that were given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Even the sinners of Israel knew the deep mysteries of the power of the letters and the difference between the higher and lower letters. They also knew how to master this power and make use of them in this world. For every letter, not the totality of the Bible or of the scroll that we are familiar with today, but for every letter that was transmitted to Moses served as a cosmic channel to ascend as a cosmic intelligence crown upon the heads of the celestial higher. What he means there is that each and every single Jew, apparently even the sinners, I don't know there were any sinners at that time, but if there were, even the sinners knew the deep mysteries of the powers of the letter. And these letters were the forces that can permit the ascending on high of these people. Now, what does it mean on high? Does it mean literally like Elijah taking his spacecraft, which is the literal interpretation? I can't say I'm the first one who's made that kind of interpretation of what happened with Elijah. Because Elijah did not die. Moses did not die, says the Zohar. They are very much alive. You mean there is something called immortality? Well, without getting into details, and it just sounds a little too ridiculous, but you know what they tell us about an astronaut who goes up there and spends about a year. When he comes back in his time life of 1 year, he'll come back and see his grandchild, an old man. Time there means something else. 1 year of his lifetime is the equivalent. I don't know how they figured it out, and frankly, it really doesn't interest me. But the fact remains that time is an invariable. That was established with Einstein's theory of relativity. It is no longer fixed. That means at different levels, There are different time influences. And consequently, this is known. I don't know how they arrived at it. And I say again, for me, it's unimportant. But that if an astronaut should spend 1 year of space-time, he will have aged 1 year. But upon his return, he will meet his grandchild, who will probably look far older than he, and even look maybe like his grandfather. Okay? And this was Elijah. How did these things come about? So as Zohar says, by the combination, because the verse in Isaiah says, ask thee a letter of the Lord, ask it either in the depth or in the height. They achieved, through the letters, they achieved another cosmic level. Time. Space. For Elijah and for Moses, in the framework of our understanding of time and space, does not exist all over. That means you can be and exist in this framework. That doesn't mean, and that doesn't prevent you from achieving what we call, in spiritual terms, another cosmic level of consciousness. You connect now with an entirely different framework. And so when Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Isaac Luria decided to travel from the Galilee to Jerusalem, it really took them no more than a second. The physical body literally traveled in no space and no time. They, within this corporeal body, which is, again, a lifeless aspect of us, and this body still can only perform one kind of job, and that is to physically express that which is in our mind. It makes no decisions of its own. And when an individual can achieve another level of cosmic consciousness, then past, future, space, time for him is non-existent. And consequently, when we ask the question, firstly, how could Rabbi Shimon, and where did Rabbi Shimon receive this kind of information that the beginning of the universe was not heaven and earth? It was 2,000 years before, but he exists here. But as we discussed last night, contrary to Einsteinian theories, we can move back in time. And he moved back in time via the letters. Via the letters, you can move back in time. The letters, the Hebrew letters, the Aleph was there before. It is there, out there now, and will be there tomorrow. It is above time, space, and motion. And so Rabbi Shimon goes on to say, the first Zohar, for those of you who would like to refer to it, we are quoting Zohar 1, page 117b. The Lord does not desire that so much be revealed to the world. And when we discuss the Lord again, we have made, again, a radical departure from the conventional religious attitude of the interpretation of God or Lord. As we said before, we have absolutely knowledge, not the slightest idea of what that means God or what that means Lord. And what we are discussing is that force, the energy, the source of energy is called God. But we're only discussing energy, the life force of anything, the life force of an atom. It is not the proton, neutron, and electron. They are merely the physical expressions of what I would like to call as the all-embracing unity. It's like a bad comparison to electricity and the plus and minus of an electric bulb. They both represent electricity, while they each represent and make manifest electrical current, either as plus or minus, but nevertheless, the internal energy force of both of them is the same reality, electric current. So that is the Lord. And so he says, the Lord does not desire that so much be revealed to the world. But when the age of Aquarius will be near at hand, even little children will discover the secrets of the wisdom. At that time, it will be revealed to all, as it is written, for then I will turn to the peoples a pure language. Referring to the Tower of Babel of last night. They had, and their source of power was that pure language. In fact, I think it's noteworthy that for those of you who are a little familiar with Israel, if you've ever been there, you know that the Spartan Jew takes the distinction of being Avis. He's always running a good second. And what is very surprising, and that was something that I took notice when I first got there, was if there was anything we weren't going to learn from the Spartan, that was Spartan Jew, that was everything. But somehow there was one thing that they seemed to maintain control, something very insignificant. You know what that was? Even the Ashkenazi Jew, for whatever reason, couldn't overcome that kind of insignificant force. That little force is referred to as the language. The tongue, the way it's spoken, is not Ashkenazi. It's Spartan. Very strange. I don't know why that, of all things, remained as part of the United Nation of Israel. But I know why. Because that was a force that during the Age of Aquarius, that force of a pure language would dominate. Because in the Age of Aquarius, this is the force that is going to be used. Okay? Now, while we're on the subject of the alphabet, I'm sure most of you have always questioned or raised the question, how come there are 22 letters? I'm sure most of you, or those of you at least familiar with the alphabet, have raised that question. Why 22 letters? If you're a conventional Jew, you have your answer. If you're an Orthodox Jew, you have your answer. So it is. That's one answer. However, in Kabbalah, as you know, that is no answer. And that should not be the answer. It's like when we have an ongoing course, hopefully in the end of April, we will start ongoing courses. We will raise the question of the Jew, what he represents, and when he was there on Mount Sinai, if you've gone to a Hebrew elementary school, you have learned two very famous words that were uttered on Mount Sinai. Naseh v'nishma. How obedient those Jews were on Mount Sinai. Probably never in the course of Jewish history has there been a nation so devoted, so obedient as to utter those two startling words, Naseh v'nishma. We will do. Then tell us what it even says. Can you imagine a Jew acting like that? Well, maybe that was on Mount Sinai. They were different. I haven't found that kind of a Jew today who's going to tell me that he will accept anything I say before I say it. But that's what it says they said. However, which strikes me as rather very strange is that section in the Talmud which declares that when the Jews were assembled on Mount Sinai, they really weren't around, all around the mountain. You know where they were located? Kafalahem ha-kagigit. He bent over the mountain, told the Jews to go into that pit, and told the Jew that if you don't accept the Bible, you've already found and purchased your burial grounds. Can you imagine? This is a very famous Talmudical statement in Tractate Shabbat. That means the Lord at that time had some doubts to the extent that they were almost coerced into accepting. So we're not very, very obedient people. And I think we're, at the very same time, very inquisitive people. I think that's the way it should be. And therefore, we will ask tonight, why are there 22 letters, not 21 and not 23? And another question that we might ask tonight, of what importance is there if I have an answer or I don't have an answer? There are 22 who've got enough problems in daily life, and if I don't have the answer to that question, what will I lack? What's going to be so terrible? So I don't know why. But Rabbi Shimon tells us that is a secret of connection or cosmic connection and the tapping of this awesome power that we have been discussing, that we were discussing last night. In chapter 4 of Genesis, Bereshit, verse 1, the Bible tells us, and Adam knew Eve, and a miracle happened. She gave birth to Cain. And the Zohar says that's indeed a miracle. Can you imagine, just by knowing her, because the Hebrew word is Adam yada et chava. Yada et chava, it doesn't say he had sexual intercourse with her. The Bible uses the word yada. He knew her, and she gave birth. And from that codified code, cosmic code, the Zohar comes to the conclusion that there is only one channel of connection to power, to energy, and that channel, that connection is knowledge. Without the knowledge of why, without yeda, without knowing, you cannot make connection. Starting revelation. That means If we are discussing during this seminar on the practical ability, as Rabbi Shimon said, these secrets will be revealed to all in the age of Aquarius, and it is revealed today. It is all here. Very little that we have to know. Without knowing why, you have not made a connection. Why is the key word. It's always been the key word of Kabbalistic teachings. Why? But if we ask why, the answer is because without understanding why, if anything, you have not made the connection. It's, as Rabbi Shimon says, all of those books in the library, that one can have access to all of the information of the universe. However, without making a connection with those books, the fact that the knowledge is available doesn't mean that I have connected with that information. Furthermore, even if I read those books, doesn't mean I've made a connection. And there is only one way that we can make that cosmic connection. The reason I call it cosmic connection is because we are discussing thoughts, energy sources, energy power, energy intelligences, because that's the only real thing that exists in this universe. That is reality, not the physical things we see around us. How do you connect with something that is intangible, metaphysical? Oh, why shall I tell you? You haven't connected to that unique cosmic energy of Shabbat. You have not. Does that mean when I pray in the morning and I know the meaning of every single word, I haven't made connection? Well, attend most of your synagogues and see if they have. But beside that, if you don't know why you're saying what you're saying, and if you don't know what sort of meditation, what thinking should be going on with those physical concepts called words, it's material. The energy, the reality is metaphysical. And you haven't made any connection. And so it's no wonder that most people are leaving religion for a very good and valid reason. They have not been able to connect. It hasn't been meaningful for them. It hasn't given that which religion had intended to provide for humankind. If anything, it has brought the opposite. So we want to know that when the Bible said Adam knew Eve, the decodification of that statement says that by knowing, you have made the connection. Of course, there was physical intercourse. However, you have physical intercourse and not necessarily make a connection. Knowing is the connection. And when we discuss reincarnation, souls entering, why children are born of one parent, not of another, the inequality of the cosmos, and as many people ask, if there is a God up there, why humans suffering? Why all of the traumas that almost every generation must pass through? But if we understand what that means when we even discuss intercourse, because physical intercourse is not what determines the soul. If what we have just said now, that reality is thinking, reality is thought, and whatever thought, as Rabbi Isaac Lurie says, goes on in the heads of those two individuals, that thinking determines what child is going to appear. And we are not discussing of a physical child. We are discussing that internal energy intelligence, the soul that will enter this particular corporeal body. Okay? So knowing is connection. Therefore, we return to our question, original question. Why 22? We please have a basis of knowing that the letters preceded the universe. And why are there 22 letters? States Abraham, the patriarch, in his Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, that the three basic energy forces in the world, the ones we spoke about when we discussed the correct meaning of chosen people, that there are three basic forces in the world. They are right, left, and central, or water, fire, and air. Now, we are not discussing physical water, because when water seeks its own level, what forces that movement of this corporeal thing called water? There's a particular energy intelligence that directs and triggers and initiates every movement of that water. What is it? It's what we call right column, sharing. How did that energy intelligence come about? That means the physical water follows the eternal intelligence. Does it always happen that way? Well, I guess it does, because I think we refer to an individual who will first act and then think as an imbecile. So even we are accustomed to the understanding that things should not become manifest until there is a prior thought. That means thinking usually precedes physical expression. So with that kind of idea in mind, the energy intelligence of sharing preceded the physical element of water and the letter that initiated and created that force of sharing was the letter Aleph. The letter Aleph. Now, time would not permit us to delve into, but hopefully in the forthcoming book on the alphabet, you'll have the particular aspects of each letter as well. But the letter Aleph is very unique. It is not for any unknown reason or inexplicable reason that the Aleph is the first letter, because it contains three basic letters. For those of you who know something about the writings of letters, you know that the top is a Yud. I see many of you who are familiar with that. Beautiful. Okay. The middle part, central column, is the Vav. That's the line that runs right across from right to left. And if we write our Sefer Torah, or if we write our Tefillin, or if we write our Mezuzot, Kabbalistically, we then know that the bottom is a Dalet. Now, it's not by any chance that 3 years ago, I explained that because scribes don't know why they're writing these mitzvot. They don't know why they're writing, what they are writing, and how they are writing these letters, the reasons for why. I said they're not connecting, and consequently, these channels of energy that the Jew supposedly should be using isn't doing the job, is not functional. And as most of you know, a little while back, Chief Rabbit declared almost all of their mezuzot were invalid. We're in a new age of Aquarius. If we want mezuzot as an ornament, then you're in the dark age. But you're familiar with the power of the alphabet, and you want a mezuzah that's going to do the job. It has that power. And so the Aleph created the energy intelligence of water. And then we have fire. The letter that created, that was instrumental in bringing fire. We are not discussing again the physical aspect of fire, because what is the internal intelligence? There is something talking in that fire. There is an intelligence, no less than you and I, cognizant of what is going on. And when it meets water, it knows what it wants to do. It wants to obliterate water. And water knows what it wants to do with fire, because they're two opposites. When you hear that crackling between water and fire, because there are two intelligent forces. They're battling with each other. They're not merely inanimate objects. There's intelligence there. And the machine was responsible for that energy intelligence coming into being. I made a mistake. I made a mistake. Even I can make a mistake. The Yud, I said the Aleph was Yud Vav Dalet. It had 3 parts. And therefore, I made the mistake of saying that the Aleph created water. That is not correct, because it would have to be associated with the central column that brings and is inclusive of all 3 elements. Air. Air is the synthesizer of everything in this universe. It's the balancing agent. Consequently, the Aleph, created air, the intelligence of air. Now, what is the intelligence of air? It is the power, an energy intelligence to restore balance between fire and water. Those were the three elements created. There isn't anything in this universe that does not consist of one of these elements. So we finally have three letters. Oh, continues Abraham the patriarch. And this is the startling revelation that these seven celestial bodies that we discussed yesterday, those that have direct influence on humankind, those seven celestial planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Moon. Seven were created by seven letters. Now, this may sound very strange. Maybe energy intelligence is you might come to grips with that kind of a realization. How the men created water? Okay. Because we're only discussing energy intelligence. But now we've gotten into the area of huge, massive bodies. And are we to believe that the letter Bet created Shabtai? Saturn? Almost sounds inconceivable. But that's what Abraham declares. Abraham the patriarch declares. It makes that kind of statement. And just to give you the other letters in relation to their planets, the Gimel created Jupiter. The Dalet created Mars. The Kaf created the Sun. The Pei created Venus, or Noga. The Resh created Mercury. And the Taf created the Moon. But is it conceivable? Is it really conceivable? Well, at least we have an answer to one of the previous questions that we asked. Shabtai Dalalo, a famous astronomer, Kabbalist, and physician, who provided us with all of the information pertaining to the planets, climatic conditions, and incidentally, there are no human beings that exist on other planets. I know when they discovered there were no Martians on Mars, it was, to most of us, a great disappointment. Nevertheless, we're here by ourselves. But there are energy intelligences out there. And while they don't know what they're looking for, they know there's extraterrestrial life out there. They're right. Not in this form. Pure energy intelligence, yes. Because every letter of the alphabet is a channel for energy intelligence, as we discussed. And when we have just concluded that the Bet created Shabtai, Saturn, then there is an intelligent energy force in Saturn. It followed the Bet. Whatever the intelligent energy intelligence of Shabtai consists of, that Bet is the internal energy force of this massive physical body called Saturn. But it has an energy intelligence. Consequently, they know, I don't even know how they know, but let's say they know that there is an energy intelligence, life force out there. I believe it too. But I know why. I know why. Because each letter represents an energy intelligent force. And if this is so, then when we asked how could Shabtai Damalo come to such firm conclusions and describe exactly the climatic conditions, terrain, and everything else, is because he was a Kabbalist. And he knew what each letter represented. And so he did not have to take his spacecraft, his high-tech golem, into outer space and observe physically Shabtai, Saturn, or Venus. Because that physical body could not contain more than its internal energy intelligence, which is the letter. So he made an effort to study the letter. And if he can come to the conclusion of what the energy intelligence of the letter was, he then boldly declared exactly what each planet consisted of. It was that simple. And when we asked, how could Rebbe Shimon make these startling revelations? He was a human being. No. He used the letters. And there is also that forbidden book that we have just published for the first time, the entire writings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, whose commentary on the Zohar had become available and has just arrived today from Israel. And there he provides us with a Shar Ruach HaKodesh, but never mention this to your rabbi, that there is the existence of such a book. But I trust Rabbi Shimon. He says in the Age of Aquarius, at that time it will be revealed to all. Like at one time it was even revealed to the sinners of Israel. These people, Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit. I don't know what Holy means yet, but I think if we added a W to it, it might give us some kind of a meaning to the word. Holy, complete. They had the system of connecting to every intelligent being because it is really simple. The letters are the intelligent beings of every physical manifestation in this universe. I'm not saying in a matter of moments can we come to a complete understanding of each and every single letter, but we have at least tonight come to some understanding that all of that knowledge is right here. It's not out there, because out there it'll never be. For the simple reason that either that information that is coming to these various observatories throughout the world are coming when the original source of that energy Might have long, long time ago disappeared. We're discussing rays of entities that have long, long since died. I want to know now what's going on there now. I want to know why, because of high-tech detection devices, we realize that the universe is not as calm as it appears. There are violent explosions, collapsing universes, expanding universe. Something terrible going on out there. But there's more going on out there if it depends on what the eye sees. But all that's going on out there starts right here.